The hardest decision that made Emily financially free, the invisible prison. Emily grew up learning that money had a sound. It sounded like silence when adults stopped talking in the room. It sounded like a deep sigh before the lights were turned off. It sounded like fear disguised as responsibility. As a child, she watched her parents work endlessly and still worry constantly. They never complained directly, but Emily learned to read what was not said. She learned that stability was sacred and risk was dangerous. On cold winter nights, when the utility bill arrived, she noticed how her mother would hold the envelope for a moment longer, as if weighing her options before opening it. Her father worked double shifts, returning home with shoulders curved by exhaustion, but always with a forced smile so as not to worry the family. Emily internalized these silent lessons. Security was everything. Dreams were dangerous luxuries. As an adult, Emily did everything right. She studied hard, worked harder, and climbed steadily up the corporate ladder. By her early 30s, she earned more than anyone in her family ever had. From the outside, her life looked like pure success. A clean, organized apartment, decent clothes, a reliable and predictable routine. People admired her discipline and assumed she felt proud. But pride was not what Emily felt at night. Alone in her apartment, surrounded by things she barely used, she felt an ache she could not explain. Expensive furniture that brought no comfort. Decorative objects chosen for appearance, not meaning. Every morning, her body resisted the day ahead. Her chest tightened before work. Her smile felt rehearsed in the mirror. She told herself this was normal, that everyone felt this way, that safety required sacrifice. One Thursday evening, she sat at her kitchen table with a bank statement in front of her. The number was higher than it had ever been. And instead of relief, she felt panic. A sudden clarity struck her like lightning. The money she had been chasing to feel secure had quietly become a cage. Emily realized she was not afraid of failing, but of staying. Staying in a life that paid well, but demanded pieces of her soul in return. That night, she asked herself a question that changed everything. What if the life she was protecting was the very thing keeping her trapped? The awakening of courage, the decision did not come suddenly. It arrived slowly, disguised as exhaustion. Emily began noticing how often her body tried to warn her. The headaches that had become constant. The shallow breathing that accompanied her during meetings. The sense that time was slipping away while she pretended everything was fine. She started doing mental calculations during her commute to work. How many more years would she have to continue like this? 30? 40? The thought made her nauseous. She watched older colleagues, trapped in the same gears, and saw her own future reflected in their tired faces. One autumn afternoon, she met Daniel, a former colleague, at a coffee shop. He looked different. Calmer. Lighter. He had a presence she didn't remember him having before. Daniel spoke about leaving the same path Emily was still on. He earned less now, but lived more. His words unsettled her deeply. Not because they sounded impossible, but because they sounded too honest. I woke up every day feeling like I was betraying myself, he said, stirring his coffee. The money was good, but I was buying a life I didn't want to live. His words echoed in Emily's mind for days. That night, she opened a notebook and wrote a single number. The amount she would need to survive without her current job. She calculated essential expenses, eliminated the superfluous, created a safety margin. She stared at that number for a long time. The fear came fast and intense, but something else followed it. Hope. The number was intimidating, yet reachable. What terrified her was not the money itself, but the uncertainty of what would come after. Emily began to change quietly. She saved aggressively, cutting expenses she had once considered essential. She sold things she once believed proved her success. Designer clothes, unnecessary electronics, empty symbols of status. She declined invitations that no longer aligned with who she was becoming. Every choice felt like shedding an identity she had spent years building. Then came the offer. A significant promotion, more money, more recognition. More of the same life she secretly wanted to escape. Accepting it would silence her doubts. Refusing it would force her to face the unknown. Emily held the offer letter in her hands and understood the truth. Financial freedom was not about earning more, it was about choosing courage over comfort. And courage demanded a price she was no longer willing to avoid. The choice was clear, but it had never felt so frightening. The leap into the abyss, the day Emily left her job, her hands trembled as she packed her belongings. Each object felt heavier than it should. Framed photos from corporate events. Notes from projects that once seemed important. Reminders of a version of herself built on approval and fear. Walking out of the building for the last time, she felt exposed, as if she had stepped into the world without armor. The glances from colleagues followed her down the hallway, some envious, others concerned. She handed in her badge at reception, and with it, a decade of certainties. The first months were relentless. No predictable income. No external validation. No structure defining her days. Every expense felt personal, a judgment on her decision. Doubt followed her everywhere, whispering that she had made a reckless mistake. On Sunday mornings, when she used to dread Monday, she now felt a different emptiness, freedom mixed with terror. Friends asked polite questions. Some admired her bravery, calling her courageous, inspiring. Others warned her gently, with stories of acquaintances who tried something similar and failed. "Are you sure you thought this through?" became a frequent question. At night, Emily lay awake wondering if freedom had been just a romantic illusion. But something unexpected happened. As fear settled, clarity grew. She realized how little she truly needed. The smaller apartment cost half the rent. Simple clothes served better than full closets. Mornings belonged to her again. She chose work that aligned with her values, even when it paid less. For the first time, money became a tool instead of a measure of her worth. One winter evening, she sat with her parents at the old kitchen table where she grew up. She noticed how peaceful she felt. No longer proving anything. No longer chasing approval. Her father held her hand and said, "You look like yourself again." She understood then that financial freedom was not about avoiding struggle, but about choosing a struggle that felt honest. Letting go of her old life hurt deeply, but staying would have hurt much more. The true wealth years later, Emily's life looked smaller to outsiders. A modest home in a quiet neighborhood. Fewer possessions, but each one chosen with intention. An income that fluctuated with seasons and projects, without the predictability of a fixed salary. But inside, her life felt expansive, rich in ways that didn't fit on bank statements. She slept deeply without the knot in her stomach that used to wake her at 3 in the morning. She laughed easily, without calculating how her joy would be perceived. She trusted herself fully, making decisions without the paralyzing weight of others' approval. Her mornings began slowly. Coffee prepared with care. Time to read, think, simply exist. Work that meant something beyond numbers on a spreadsheet. Conversations that mattered. Silences that comforted instead of frightened. When people asked how she became financially free, they expected a clever secret. An investment strategy. A stroke of luck. Emily always gave the same answer, watching the surprise on their faces. "I stopped trading my life for comfort and started investing it in meaning." The hardest decision she ever made did not make her rich overnight. It made her honest. Honest about her limits. Honest about her fears. Honest about what freedom truly costs. On a spring afternoon, sitting in a cafe where she now worked a few hours a week, a young woman approached her. She had read about Emily's story online. "Aren't you afraid of failing?" she asked, her eyes full of her own fear and hope. Emily smiled, remembering herself years ago. "Every day," she answered honestly. "But I discovered that the greatest failure would be never trying to live the life I truly want." Emily learned that real wealth is measured by time, peace, and ownership of one's own life. Waking without an alarm because your body has rested. Choosing projects out of passion, not desperation. Saying no without guilt. Saying yes with complete joy. That kind of freedom only comes when you choose yourself, even when the choice feels terrifying. Her journey was imperfect. There were difficult months, wrong decisions, moments of regret, but it was hers, authentically, completely hers. And that was the moment she understood she was finally free. Not free from responsibilities or challenges, but free from the prison of living someone else's life. Freedom, she discovered, was not the absence of fear. It was the courage to live despite it.